we get asked quite a bit, even with my practice, is, how long does it take to heal?
The one thing I can just say, because I lived through it, was like, I don't know how long and I can't tell you how fast. What I can tell you is that I promise there is light on the other side, but the only thing that you can do to potentially make it go faster or be less painful is to surrender to it, because it's really not up to us. If I had known that it would take, nearly 2.5, 3 years for me to die and be reborn again, I don't know what I would have said. I kept thinking it was over, and then there was more, and like the ripple effect. And the more we clutch and cling and try to control, the more resistance that we'll feel.
Do you guys know how difficult it is to find a high quality supplement line that doesn't just destroy your gut? Most pre-workouts and post-workouts, or even like on-the-go snack options like beef jerky or protein bars, they're terrible for your gut health. They're full of xanthan gum and guar gums and fillers and artificial sweeteners, which disrupt your gut microbiome and lead to chronic bloating, constipation, diarrhea, and not to mention, when our gut is off, all of the other symptoms like hormone imbalances, thyroid issues, mental health issues, which is why I'm just obsessed about gut health. But anywho, I have not been able to find a good supplement line out there, and I had to cut out all of these fitness type supplements when I was really struggling with a lot of my own gut issues. Until recently, I found Paleo Valley. And Paleo Valley is one of the first supplement companies that hands down is incredible for your gut health, whether you're on a gut healing journey or you're someone who just wants to optimize your gut health and overall health. Their founder, Autumn, actually suffered with IBS herself. So she created this entire supplement line specifically to be gut friendly. And I'm not lying with you guys. Their whey protein powder, which is grass-fed and finished, gum-free, artificial sweetener-free, no issues, no bloating, no constipation, no diarrhea, no upset stomach, which is literally like the first time in my entire life that I've not had issues with a protein powder. And they even have super yummy grass-fed and finished beef jerky sticks, which are made with a collagen casing instead of the typical citric acid casing, which is terrible for your gut health. And if you want to try out some of their other products, they even have a bone broth protein powder. I love adding that into whether it's like my oatmeal in the morning or my protein shakes. It literally tastes like the Nestle hot chocolate powders, if you ever had those as a kid, which were not gut friendly. And then they have great supplements too, like their apple cider vinegar capsules or even their turmeric capsules, which are great for inflammation and gut health. So if you want to get a discount, you can use my code using the link in the show notes here, which is paleovalley.com/Rachel Scheer podcast. But all of that's going to be in the show notes. So check out the supplement line because, guys, you know me, I would not have this on my podcast if it was not awesome and gut friendly.
I think a great place for us to start is really when you realized you needed to do a lot more of the deeper healing work, right? Because I think I can only speak for myself and my own story. I feel like I remember vividly like a moment in time where I was like, okay, there's a lot more that I need to really dive into that's here. And for a lot of my life, it was like looking around me and, like, okay, it's this relationship and it's the person and it's myself and it's all of these things, but it wasn't okay, there are some things that are coming up and they keep repeating themselves and I really need to do a lot of this deep, deep work. So what was that moment for you? Or what was the moment even?
Well, no, I'll tell you the exact moment. And I was literally getting a colonic in the middle of New York City. It was the city was closed. I had opened my second fitness studio, 3,000 square feet in the heart of Soho, 3 weeks before COVID shut down. And so then I moved to Miami Beach to spend time with my family because the world was closed and I was better off being by the beach, instead of like a shoebox apartment waiting for the world to open. and then moved back to New York City to try and figure out this business that I'd put my heart, soul, lifetime, savings in. And again, everything was stuck, everything was closed. And similarly, like my body was stuck. Like there's this anxiety, this fear, like my gut was frozen, and you don't know what you don't know. So my feeling this way was normal because that's all I really knew. But it was literally, as you asked, the moment getting a clinic in New York City, and the therapist said, I smoke bufo. And I was like, what's that? Hmm. And she started telling me about toad medicine. And there was a little bit of noise in my world because my best friend at the time was also working for me, and she had like dabbled in mushrooms, and I'd always come from a spiritual place, starting practicing yoga at 15, been into meditation and like all of these practices, as well as like fitness and movement for healing. So she was in my life. And then the man that I was dating was heavily involved in MAPS and MDMA assisted therapy for PTSD from growing up in a wartime country. So there was noise in my world. And then I'm on this table, and then I hear toad medicine. And I had heard it once before on a date with an Australian chef, like at the best restaurant I've ever been to, like making out at this 12-person table. And he's like, I smoke the toad. And I'm like, okay, dude, you're weird. But like, literally, I was just like, I didn't even hear it. Right. And they say the medicine calls you when you're ready, if you're ready. So I'm having this experience. She mentions toad, and I'm like, whatever it is, like, I'm just ready. Like I'd reached the point of my business is closed. It's been my definition of self for all of this time. My relationships aren't working. And without really understanding it, like I pretty much had hated myself my whole life. But from the outside, I looked successful and professional and came from a great family and all of the things. And the inside, I was suffering. So a couple of days, she said to me, she gave me his number, the shaman. She said, he's never in town, but give him a call. And I like sat and looked at the business card on my coffee table. And I was like, I don't know. And then I just like gave it a shot. And he's like, he literally texted back right away. And he said, I just got back from a 5-month sabbatical. Are you in town this weekend? And I was like, yep. And I just showed up. Like it was the kind of thing that I'd never done a recreational drug before, except like smoke some pot in New York City and in college. And because I think my subconscious knew that they were meant to heal me, not hurt me, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I had that 20-minute psychoactive 5-MeO DMT experience, and my entire life exploded. Mm-hmm. So the moment that I knew was the moment that I said yes and showed up to create change. And I didn't know the extent of what I was about to step into, but if I had known, I might not have done it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In that moment, what was some of the things that came up for you?
In the 5-MeO experience? You
said like your life exploded and shifted and changed at that point.
Yeah. So for anyone that's not, experienced or educated on this, 5-MeO DMT, it's a psychoactive, it's the molecule that is used to make ayahuasca, but it's also the molecule that your brain secretes before you die. So this 5-MeO experience is really like an ego death. The time I also didn't know what that meant, but for years I had like layered on ego of this like fighter, this warrior, this, pretty masculine, intense energy of like, no one can hurt me, this like strength, but from a really wounded place and without understanding why. So when I stepped into Janis Joplin's old apartment in the Chelsea Hotel to smoke 5-MeO DMT, when I felt, the smoke, and then I felt like the fractals in my brain just kind of like cracking, and I fell off into the abyss. And after everything went dark, it was pretty much like watching a 20-minute movie of my life, of like faces and places and feelings and lights and sounds and grief and joy. And like this clearing of my energy chakras, my energy centers, clutching onto my solar plexus, which is known to hold your self-confidence, seeing the color yellow that represents the Manipura or the solar plexus chakra. And coming out of that and being like, what just happened? What does that even mean? So the issue was that there was so much presented to me and I had no point of reference. I didn't understand any of it.
Yeah. And for everybody who's listening, DMT, dimethyltryptamine, it's also something that is released when you do breath work. I know I get DMT hits, and I dated a guy, and he was really into breath work, and that was like one of my first introductions to like DMT. You also can experience it when you go really, really deep into a meditation, but when you're doing something like 5-MeO, DMT, ayahuasca, there's this look, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a ton that is released all at once, right? And within that, it creates not necessarily like a high, just like what you said. It's like this death of the ego, which the ego is the illusory self. It's the view of self that we have based off of our achievements, the things that have happened to us in our past, between the things that we have. It's really all of the views that we have of ourselves. So there's this beautiful moment where there's no real view of self, and it's just pure essence. You're fully present for the first time in your entire life, and you're being. And I think within that, you really can see clearly who you truly are. You can see in that moment, like, oh, I'm not all of those things. Like, these are things that have happened in my life, but I'm not all of those things. This is really who I am at my core. This is my essence. And there's this bliss and this beauty, and there's this love that's there on this other side, versus all of the false illusions that we've been taught and conditioned to believe over time of who we are. So I am a big believer in doing, assisted psychedelic work for trauma related therapy. There's a lot of great research out there about it. Not a huge fan of it for people using it recreationally, because just like anything, it can be abused and used in the wrong way. And, all drugs that have been created at the core, they served a purpose to help people in some way, shape, or form. And then, people take them and use them for different purposes. But I'm curious kind of what came after that event, because I know for a lot, that's not like the healing work. It's kind of like the door, right? It just kind of opens the door of like, okay, I have some more unpacking to do here.
That's exactly what it was. It was almost like Pandora's box, or I fell down like the Alice in Wonderland. I like fell down the tunnel, the hole, whatever, like into this freedom, as you mentioned. Like, I left feeling so cleared and with so much love in my heart, and this softness that I don't think I'd ever tapped into before. And like walked down 7th Avenue, like got some dairy-free chocolate and like my favorite pumpkin tempeh bowl, and like went home. And then I was just like, now what? Because in my experience, I wasn't privy to any conscious memories of trauma in my life. So this being the door of Pandora's box, it was faces, places, time periods, memories, feelings, but nothing connected to, and not connected to anything. So I felt this clearing. I went home. I tried to sleep. The toad was still in me. There was a lot of energy moving. And then I was left with, okay, now what? Because there were a lot of question marks. What does this mean? Like what, when, who, where? And so I was invited 5 days later to sit in a ceremony with MDMA and psilocybin. And originally I was like, I'm good. Like, again, this was coming from the lens of like, I don't do drugs. I'll have a martini, but then like one, and then I'm face planning. Like, I just am not really good with extra substance in my body, even caffeine. So I smoked this toad. I was invited to this ceremony, and I was really hesitant. And like I said early on, I typically don't dip my toe in. I'm either all or nothing, but there's a hesitation involved. And typically the hesitation comes before the biggest breakthroughs for me. So in all of my experience, I usually am like a pretty strong no before I'm like a hell yes. So I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm good. And then I asked some questions. I spoke to the facilitator, and I remember just saying yes and showing up. And it was in that ceremony, 25 strangers in a loft in Brooklyn with MDMA and psilocybin, that when I finally surrendered, I pulled up my first memory of a sexual assault when I was 17. And so imagine, again, being surrounded by 25 strangers in a loft in Brooklyn, taking this substance that you'd never taken before. I didn't really have any I'm not a researcher. I just like, I feel it. If it feels like this is something I should do, even if that means it scares me, I show up for it. But in that showing up, the medicine was very clear, and it just said it was blank, the perpetrator's name. That's why you dated blank. I'd had like not even one relationship that was so caustic after, but a series of relationships that one so intense that like it almost led me to like losing my job that I dreamed of, basically losing most of my friendships, relationships, and potentially losing my life. So the medicine fed me like it was blank at 17. That's why you dated blank. So I think beyond the trauma that I pulled up to start and the shock of that, it was the pain of knowing that I had recreated the patterns in my personal life for half of my life, for the following 17 years. So in this darkness, as I started walking the path and pulling out memories and pretty much putting my life back together again, almost like Humpty Dumpty, or at first just like pulling out all the trauma before I integrated it. It was like time stopped and nothing was real, because like, then I went from associating myself as this fighter, this warrior, this entrepreneur, this like privileged, beautiful family, loving person, to being like a rape victim, and I don't even know that I've ever used those words before, but like me, like sexual assault, like my best friend's father, like it was just like, what? So from the colonic table to the moment of the DMT to the next moment, and this was all within what, like a week, 10 days, my entire life started to explode, implode, or start to make sense, rather.
That's a lot to uncover in a week. And I know for a lot of people that can be very overwhelming, but also at the same time, it can also be very freeing and liberating, right? To really finally feel like you have an understanding, right? And I see this all the time in my practice doing functional medicine. You know, women think that they're crazy for all of their symptoms that they're experiencing. They go to the doctors, they get the Band-Aid type diagnosis. You have IBS, you have, an autoimmune condition, or they just kind of brush it off and say, okay, there's nothing wrong with you. And they're like, I think I'm crazy. People like will tell them that they're crazy. And then when we get their test results back, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. And there's that first level of just relief and knowing like, okay, this makes sense. Like it makes sense as to why I've felt the way that I feel. It makes sense as to why certain things have been created in my life. I'm a big believer is we're always creating, right? We create everything in our life based off of the place in which we're relating to ourselves, right? It's the views we have of ourselves. And when you have unhealed trauma, there are certain views that we carry, certain belief systems that we have about ourselves, right? It's I'm bad, I'm stupid, whatever it may be. It's very subconscious, which means below our level of thinking. It's not like you're always thinking that, although sometimes, yes, because oftentimes you have very negative self-talk to go along with it, but there's this view of self. And when we operate from this view of self that we've been carrying, we create from that place, right? Meaning, if I think that, I'm unlovable or unworthy, and that's a belief that I'm carrying around, which has been even some of mine from a lot of the work that I have done, we spend our life trying to disprove that belief. So I'm going to become perfect in the way that I look, perfectionistic. I'm going to become the hyperachiever and all of these things, which is like, you think the opposite, but it's still operating from this view of self. If there's a lot of self-criticism of ourself, there's very often criticism of other people too, which then creates those relationships. And we're like, why is this happening? Well, behaviors don't just exist in one department, right? Behaviors exist in general. Like we carry core behaviors, whether it's like, there's criticalness, there's control, a lot of perfectionists, carry a lot of that control, which can be for themselves or other people and things in their life. And then we create from this place overall. So I believe part of healing is really peeling back these layers to understand the ways in which we relate to ourselves, the views that we've been carrying of ourselves. Yes, it's good to like know where those came from because it gives us a sense of like, okay, this wasn't something that I was born with. This was a belief that, you know, I created based off of this thing that happened to me, right? And there's this part of being able to disassociate and disconnect and, you know, some form of trauma, definitely a disassociation. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about there's this disconnecting from that view of self because knowing it was something that wasn't just innate belief that you were born with, it was something that was created in a moment of time. And I think that's what's so healing for so many people is realizing that and then being able to begin to relate to themselves from a different place, right? We begin to slowly relate to ourselves from a place of like, you know, I am worthy. I am this. And it takes time for sure. I'm sure for you too on your journey, it wasn't like a single moment where you're like, I'm healed, right? It's like a continuous like work of like working on that relationship with self, even after you've uncovered a lot of things, right?
So many of you guys know my story of losing my health, dealing with hormonal imbalances, thyroid issues, depression, anxiety, and gut issues that were so severe. I almost had my entire large intestine removed, and Western medicine completely failed me. They gave me trash can diagnosis like IBS, depression, gave me a bunch of medications. And, you know, if I wouldn't have taken my health in my own hands today, I would be without an entire organ, like literally. And that's why I created what I wish I had, what I needed, a holistic mind and body approach, a functional medicine approach that said, why do we have this problem in the first place? And what can we do to restore function? This is the difference between thriving instead of just surviving and managing your symptoms. So if you're somebody who is sick and tired of being sick and tired, dealing with stubborn gut issues or hormonal imbalances or weight loss that you feel like is not moving anywhere, or thyroid issues and autoimmune condition, there is hope. There is another approach. And me and my team of registered dietitians, we want to help you. We want to be the support there for you. We want to do the functional medicine lab testing, look at your gut, your hormones, your thyroid, your adrenals, deficiencies, toxins that you can have in your body, get to know what you're doing with your nutrition, look at your lifestyle, look at your previous medical history, and help you create a customized plan to not just only heal, but get to the best health of your entire life. So if you're somebody who's ready to take a root cause approach to healing and step into the best version of you, fill out our application on our website, rachelscheer.com, and book a free 30-minute call. Absolutely free to do this call. Our goal on this call is to better get to know your goals and how this approach may work for you. So click the link in the show notes and book a free call if you would like to learn more.
Yeah. And to that, you know, for me, it was just deep shock and sadness and grief. But before that even happened, it was denial, like rejection. How could this be? You know, and the morning after this experience, I got home at 3:00 in the morning. I got in an Uber alone. I was so terrified and also just in shock. And I remember walking up, I don't know if you're familiar with New York City, but past Balthazar and Spring Street in Soho. And it's just sort of this landmark area. And my studio was right around the bend and I'm crying hysterically, but I was on my way to my closed studio to do what I'd done for 15 plus years, was move my body to get back in, to return home from the anxiety, the fear, the depression in my head, to come back into my body through movement. So I figured I could put on a pair of boxing gloves or get on my yoga mat and just find some calm. And I remember looking up at the sun as I'm walking up the street and just hysterically crying and said, please, God, like, help me, just help me. And it was in that moment I rounded the bend and I felt a tap on my shoulder, and it was the facilitator from the night before. And I just fell into his arms. And it was just one of those moments of like, the deepest surrender, but also like the deepest gratitude for having asked for help, which was also something that was so foreign to me, granted from a higher power. But like when you train yourself to be a warrior, no one can hurt you, no one can touch you, and no one can help you, right? You can do it. You do it all yourself. So the shock, the denial, and then like the confronting of this first memory, and then trying to make peace with it. And to be honest, I'm not going to say the last thing on my mind, but I wasn't cognizant enough of understanding the depth of which this had affected my entire life story to give myself the self-compassion that I needed. I was still in this mentality of like, it couldn't be. How could this be?
Shock.
Just such shock, devastation, confusion. Then what do? Call my parents and tell them that someone they trusted, raped me when I was 17, and that parlayed into so much of my behavior and my resentment towards them. And, there was this snowball effect. But to make matters worse, like that was the tip of the iceberg. Like with plant medicine, I didn't get it at the time, but whatever I experienced memory-wise in the first ceremony, it was what was closest to the surface. And so I had made this commitment, like, I've seen enough. Like, I don't need to do this anymore. Thank you. And then something in me, my higher self, my intuition told me to keep walking. So that really started a series of like 2.5 years of pretty intense psychedelic assisted therapy, every month, every 3 months to, every week towards the end of this to just push through, of excavating everything in me that was never mine, and the habits, patterns, relationships as a result. But through that process, as you mentioned, like I learned compassion for self because I finally acknowledged that I'm worthy simply because I'm here. I didn't have to do anything to prove that. I could let go of the judgment, the comparison, the self-doubt, the self-hate, the disordered everything, the failed relationships, and actually see that my worldview externally was just a worldview of my internal system. So I had to change it. You said the subconscious. I had to change the internal playlist, the way that I saw myself, so that everything around me could become more available, abundant through a lens of love instead of pain.
For you, how long do you feel like that process was? Because one question, we get asked quite a bit, even with my practice, is, how long does it take to heal? And I feel like I know your answer, but I want everybody to hear it who's listening, because we'll do coaching 4 months, 6 months, and then people continue after that. And we're always in, of course, like who wouldn't be? Like we want to heal as quick as possible. Like we want the expedited healing, and like, how can I make this go faster? My gut issues, whatever it may be, and I talk a lot about holistic healing. So yes, it is oftentimes like doing the nutrition, the diets, the healing protocols, bacteria overgrowth, addressing that with antimicrobials. It's, but the whole person has to really heal at the core. And in a little bit, I want to dive into some of like your symptoms, and like, I know you suffered with some gut issues even too, and how that was connected. But how would you share with somebody who's maybe at the beginning of their healing journey, or realizing maybe there's some more healing they have to do? Maybe it's more physical symptoms right now and there's not a connection. Maybe it is more on the emotional side, like failed relationships and constant burnout and, constant anger, insomnia, to know what that healing process looks like. And I know it's so different for everybody, but just not having to like rush it.
Yeah. I mean, it's, as you said, like you work with people and everyone wants to know how long, how fast, when, the answer, right? The quick fix in a way. And the same as I work with people or speak to people in whatever way, my clients, the one thing I can just say, because I lived through it, was like, I don't know how long and I can't tell you how fast. What I can tell you is that I promise there is light on the other side, but the only thing that you can do to potentially make it go faster or be less painful is to surrender to it, because it's really not up to us. If I had known that it would take, nearly 2.5, 3 years for me to die and be reborn again, I don't know what I would have said. I kept thinking it was over, and then there was more, and like the ripple effect, and the more we clutch and cling and try to control, the more resistance that we'll feel. And in this ironic way, when I talk about my fitness concept, I started this concept called Box and Flow. It's a boxing yoga hybrid. And the idea of it was to face your fight to find your flow. So no mirrors in the space, not about what you look like, just about how you feel. And I created this as a healing modality because for me, it was how I was healing since I was 15, 20. But I had no idea what I was healing. I just thought I was anxious and insecure and like hated my body and, would wake up angry and like worried. And I could get back in my body because the concept was to the beat of the music, 9 rounds in the heavy bag, no breaks in life, into a vinyasa flow to sort of like really show yourself how strong you are. The only rule was don't drop your hands, never give up on you. So I was training myself to be resilient. I was training others to be resilient. And in a way, I was teaching a hero's journey without ever having experienced one until I shut my doors. Mm-hmm. So back to your question, how long, how fast, like what does 9 lives mean? 9 rounds, it's not a 45-minute class, but I think that the greatest thing you can do for self is wake up every day and find something that challenges you, even in like a small way, like sprint up a hill or do something different or get out of your comfort zone. Because when we surprise ourselves, when we take our breath away, when we feel our heart skip a beat, like that reminder that we're alive. And when we take it to the next level and take our breath away, like because we're doing something that is hard, what was hard becomes easy. So I trained myself for this journey. I trained myself to walk the path for 2.5, 3 years and dive into so much medicine, so many different modalities, 30 years of suppressed subconscious trauma so that I could bring myself back to life. So when now looking back on it, and even though this is still like fresh, it didn't matter. And it doesn't matter how long. And it certainly wasn't up to me how fast. The only thing that mattered was that I never gave up on myself. Mm-hmm. I never dropped my hands.
That's powerful. And I want to highlight too, for everybody who's listening, she said different modalities, and I'm sure different people who even helped you along the way. It wasn't this one thing I did that fixed it all. It wasn't this one person, this therapist I went to and they fixed it all. It's really not any of those things really fixing you, right? At the core, like none of those are fixing you. You are healing yourself by leaning in and doing the deep inner work. And a lot of these things are guides. They help open doors. They point you in different directions. Somebody who even is helping you maybe on the coaching side, the therapy side, doing a lot of the deep inner work. They're not doing the work for you. They're not healing you. And even the plant medicine that's used, it's not like healing you, right? At the core, it's like opening things up for you to do the deep, deep, deep inner work. So I wanted to highlight that because, very often it's not one thing that you do, right? Like people may even come to our practice and they do a lot of the testing and they uncover they have SIBO and they have hormone imbalances and they do a lot of that work. And then, we've had people who are like, okay, but I'm not fully healed. And it's like, but that was a big, big part that you needed to address, but there's still more work to do. And how beautiful. This was a piece of your full healing journey. And now you get to step in and lean into some of this deep healer work. And sometimes it might not even just only be this next one person you see, but not having to rush it, just being able to lean in. And even at the core, falling in love with the journey, right? Because if you can fall in love with doing a lot of the deep inner work too, it's going to make it that much, I guess you could say easier. Like, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure how you believe on this, but I'm not sure we ever get to a point where we're like, I'm healed, period. Period at the end. I think we get to the point where we can release a lot of the core things that are causing dis-ease in the body and causing disruption. But anytime you also up level in your life, like you step into something that's new and bigger and you're pushing yourself and you're growing, just like what you're talking about, you're like, oh, hello, this is back. Hi. I thought we kind of, we healed this. And it's like, oh, we did at this level. We did at this level, but now we're operating at a new level and there is more healing that we get to do. And I think that's something I'd want everybody to hear is like, it is a healing. It is actually at the core a lifelong journey. Yes, sometimes there's some initial healing, like we need to get out of like the hypervigilant nervous system and a lot of the symptoms that have been manifested. But sometimes healing is like, it's a beautiful, great thing. It's like, oh, good. Oh, good. There's more. And this actually means I'm getting out of my comfort zone. I'm growing. And I'm stepping into a new version of myself. And every time you do that, there's going to be more levels to peel back.
So much to unpack there. And back to, all of it. And this idea of like, it's not one thing. The doors of my studio said everything you need is inside. So this idea that our tools and our answers are inside. And for me, that meant knowing to say yes to certain healers that I was like vetting, knowing to walk with a certain substance when, knowing to call a functional medicine doctor to say, hey, doc, something's wrong with my gut. I'm exhausted. Like, knowing, trusting that. So what you said, we are our healers. We are our best resources. And so much of the junk that becomes us as a result of trauma and all that comes with it, experience, life, conditioning, it's about unpacking all of it so that we can get down to what we need, like that intuition, that knowing, that higher self, that trust, and using the tools that we have to clear out all of the space. And so it's funny, I said to my functional medicine doctor, I said, what does this phrase mean to you? Everything you need is inside. And he said, well, it's kind of ironic you're asking me because so much of what I do and prescribe is external. And I said, yes. And even your knowing to prescribe that is from an internal source. Like we are our sovereign beings, but it's stepping into that, as you said, in this journey of this higher power of knowing that we can and that we will, and to trust. And so in that too, when you're mentioning like timeline and that maybe healing is an ongoing process and it's always that up level, I look at it like love, like falling in love. There's a surrender involved. So we want to control an outcome of get the job, get the dream, get the spouse, the mate, the man, whatever it is, get all of the things that we want. But in the like getting, there's a gripping, there's a control there. When like in my experience, the greatest things that have come into my life have been even just an idea or an answer, have been in a moment where I'm not thinking about it at all, where I'm just letting go. And it's so hard, right? It's like, it's so hard. And yet life really, to me, is a series of surrender. How much can we let go? Because what's really in our control is, in my experience, simply the way that we respond or react. So if you can just like lean into that, as you said, knowing that like, I believe you're held, you're guided, can trust that. Even the fact that you're stepping into wanting to heal, like that decision, what a gift to know that's not working, right? I think it's all here for us. We just have to see that possibility. And no, I didn't always think like this. I didn't. It's a series of, unlayering, letting go and surrender and trusting. And I've never felt so free. I've never felt so much love. I've never felt so deeply connected to everything and also nothing, like this idea of non-attachment. And I say all of that in full transparency. I'm not in a relationship. I live in Austin. I love Austin, but I don't know if I'll be here beyond the next 4 months. I don't know. I live in my body. I love my body. My body doesn't define me. I just feel this incredible fullness that I've never, ever felt because I never dropped my hands. I never gave up on myself. And I think it makes me want to cry because no one is ever going to have your own back except you. There are people in your life, your greatest partners, your family, everything else, but like, it is up to you to show up for you, not even every day, every single moment of every day. We have a choice to literally stand in our knowing or to abandon ourselves in simple things, doing things we know aren't good for us. But then whatever, it's a little thing, it's a glitch, it's no big deal. It's coming back to that knowing, coming back to that rooted, that grounding, that higher self, that connection to what's above and below. And and not giving up on you, no matter the challenge.
And you know what's so interesting about this is so much of the healing, right, is coming from where we didn't love ourselves in the ways that we needed to, but in the process of leaning in and doing this work and showing up for yourself and never giving up, that's actually you loving yourself, like in that moment. And that's where there's, I'm sure, emotion that comes out about it, because there's like this deep love and like self-trust too that comes from that, of like, you know what, like I may get knocked down, this may be a journey, this may be tough, this may be hard, but you know what, I'm gonna get back up, I'm gonna keep going. And in that process, you're rebuilding this beautiful self-love for yourself, because you're fighting for yourself. You're truly loving yourself in a way that maybe you didn't experience in your life, that you weren't taught to view yourself as. And it's like being able to give yourself that gift. And I think that's so beautiful for everybody to hear, and give so many people such, you know, inspiration, and to know like what this healing journey really looks like, which will look very different for every person, but just being able to hear, you know, an example of everything that you've walked through and see what's possible. I think that's really incredible.
Thank you. I actually, something just came to me. I love turtles. I never did. And I was on the path walking around the lake yesterday. And whenever I see a turtle, I get like giddy, like a schoolgirl. And it's not just because I love Ninja Turtles. I love Ninja Turtles because they love anchovies and I love anchovies. And, a turtle to me represents two things. First, they carry their home with them. Their home isn't where they are, it's who they are. So in my entire journey, I always come back to this. Yes, everything you need is inside, but considering that home is who you are. So how do you feed your home? How do you care for your home? How do you clean your home? How do you take care of it? You know, who do you allow in it? All of these things, like this turtle representing like home as a being as opposed to a location. So seeing a turtle, like home is who you are, as a reminder. And then second, a turtle to me reminds me of this thing that I constantly remind myself of pace over race, of just acknowledging in this journey, it's not about how far, how fast. It's just about like this turtle that just keeps going. And, you know, the tortoise and the hare and all of that tall tale. But when I see a turtle, I'm just reminded of the beauty of being who you are and knowing that you're going to get there. You just have to keep going.
I love that. I love that analogy with the turtle. I feel like this is an incredible place to bring this podcast to a close. I wouldn't want to lead it anywhere else. I think your story has been so beautiful and inspiring for so many people to be able to hear. And I appreciate you and honor you for being so open, vulnerable, and willing to share that, because I know I got chills a couple of times just listening to it, from being able to relate to you in so many levels. And I know so many women and men will be able to experience that too. And it gives other people the nudge of just like, okay, I'm ready to lean in. I'm ready to surrender. So where can people follow you, check out all of the awesome work that you're doing?
So you can find me on Instagram at Liv Young, Livyung. And I very much go by Olivia, but I was given this beautiful name, Liv Young, Olivia Young. And to me, I had to understand it, but it really stands for like learning yourself to love yourself. To me, that's what Liv Young is. And I've long said you have to work hard to live young. So really putting in the effort to feel the ease, because this idea of loving yourself is a process, and it's a never ending process, that always reminder. So Instagram at Liv Young. My website is livyoung.co. If you want to book a session, I do a lot of interesting work. I also write a lot. I have a book that I've been working on, and yeah, please reach out. I would love to connect with whomever is listening.
You have a podcast too, right?
I do. I have a podcast called the Liv Young Podcast. Yes, on YouTube.
About anti-aging.
Right. And it's so funny. Yes. And I think that's, you know, at the same time, I think the energy that sort of is entangled with self-love is a vibrancy that creates this almost fountain of youth.
Yeah.
There's essence
The
to it.
childlike innocence that you begin to harness and step into. So it's actually very true to the core, because healing is really like, it's the best anti-aging cream you could ever do, is the deep healing work. So I thank you. And I thank you everybody for tuning in to this episode. This has been Scheer Madness.
Thank you.